Good morning, everybody. I know it's Saturday, but I want to encourage you all to just sort of scoot in a little bit if you're comfortable with that. We'd love to be able to see everybody and give you a warm Michigander welcome. My name is Carla Canales. I'm thrilled to be back in Michigan. I'm originally from Ypsilanti and very, very excited to have the chance to moderate with our two panelists today who are just outstanding and have really been the exemplification of excellence in their field. So let me start by just telling you a little bit about both of these gentlemen, neither of which really needs introduction. Matthew Van Biezen, many of you know, is the new president of the University Musical Society. Prior to being here, he spent 5 years at the head of the Houston Symphony, 2 years as the head of the Melbourne Symphony, and 5 years as the head of the New York Philharmonic. What I find particularly interesting with Matthew is he was a professional musician, professional French horn player, if I'm correct. And Emile Kahn is coming here from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he is the first executive director for the arts. Not only does he fulfill his responsibilities in that capacity, he also is on the faculty there, teaching artistic entrepreneurship and performance theory. Prior to being at Chapel Hill, he was the president of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, so familiar here with Michigan, has done quite a bit of work in this community. Was also with the Seattle Symphony, and I find particularly interesting, he serves on the National Council on the Arts, so a fellow advocate. Not a musician by background, unless there's something I didn't find.
I am.
Oh, you are? Oh, tell us about that. Which instrument?
Violinist.
Violinist, okay. I did not find that online, so my apologies.
It's a good thing.
You got it scrubbed from his.
Well, you know, what I find very interesting with both of these arts leaders here is that they both come from an orchestral background, and they're both currently in positions that are unique as university presenters. So let's just back up to that first point. Given that you both have this vast experience with orchestras, I want to sort of go right to a question that's, I think, at the heart of the Sphinx organization. And I'm wondering if you could speak to this desire to change the demographics in orchestras and perhaps comment on why haven't we seen more change happen faster?
Shall I go first?
Sure.
Can you first clarify the question? When you say, why haven't we seen more change in what form are you suggesting?
A change in the diversity of orchestras. I know that's at the core of the Sphinx mission.
Right.
Essentially, you know, from at least what I understand of Sphinx, Aaron really began this organization with a strong desire to see more African American and Latinos in American professional orchestras. So I just sort of wanted to take a step back before we go forward into your current positions, and I wonder if you might be able to speak to that point, since it's really at the heart of this organization.
Well, obviously it's been a number of years since I've worked for an orchestra, about 14, and the last orchestra I worked with, and I see Anne here as well, my successor at the DSO. At the DSO, we've always felt that we were at the forefront of really trying to drive that change, and I think in many ways led the field in trying to make that possible. In terms of why it's not more diverse, you know, I think, like everyone says, it really does start at the young age, and you know, perhaps we can all say that it needs to start earlier than even where Sphinx starts programs. And but I think the question for me, as I've left the orchestra world, is less about why aren't orchestras more diverse, is really more about the state of classical music and who's interested, and how is pursuing a career in classical music actually a vibrant, exciting future, and what can we do in the field to actually make it more so. And the more attractive we can make it, the more possibilities we can create, I believe the more diverse we can make it.
Great, thank you.
Well, first, thank you for having me here today. It's great to be with you, Carla and Emile. It's a very difficult question. It's one with which many of us who've worked in the orchestral space have grappled with for many years, and there's no easy answer. Jesse Rosen was in a previous panel earlier today. I think there's no question that it's one of the real great conundrums within the professional orchestral space here in the United States. And some of it's definitely because of the whole question of the continuum of music education and a pipeline, if you will, of players. But I dare say, and I will fall on the sword, that many of us who are administrators for a long time did not do enough, were not intentional enough about that work and commitment to having greater diversity on our stages, both members of our orchestra, but also soloists and in a programming sense as well. It was one of the things that was difficult to actually, in terms of my decision to leave the orchestral space, and especially at the New York Philharmonic, because I sensed that there was, at last, at least during my professional orchestra career, a moment in which the field was starting to really, as a field, come together and become more serious about it. And many colleagues who are here in this room right now can attest to that. So I think there is a moment, but it requires action and intention right now, but it also requires diligence and patience and understanding that this is not something that is changed overnight. This is years and years and years of frankly, a system that was not at all designed to increase diversity on stage.
Yeah. Matthew, I kind of want to pick up on that. I just finished reading an essay that was published, I think, on ums.org. I encourage everybody to check it out. Some very, very thoughtful remarks that you've shared with us about art as a vehicle for cultural and social change. And so I kind of want to now come to your current positions. You're both leading two of the most important university presenting organizations in the country. And I'm wondering, how are you currently using this unique position, which is quite different from a traditional presenting organization, to think about arts in terms of the social impact that you can create in your communities?
Do you want me to
Go ahead.
Well, for me, it's one of the most exciting aspects of my work now and my work with our team and with our board and with the leadership at the University of Michigan is this whole idea that it's not, the arts are not simply there to be a wonderful enhancement in the educational landscape. They're there to serve a purpose and to think and help address and create dialogue around social issues of our time. And I know from my interactions with Emil and many of our colleagues in this, what we call the major university presenting sort of space, it's been a commitment that's been there for some time, and I think is a commitment that's growing. And to my mind, it's one of the things that for me is incredibly exciting about not only having a multidisciplinary series that like we have at UMS, but the way in which we're able to sort of channel this work and frankly engineer this work to not only be artistic in nature, but to be a catalyst for discussion and for really delving into social issues of today. And I think we have, unfortunately, an unbelievably disproportionately high number of issues with which we're all dealing.
I think our program is much younger than Matthew's. Ours is only 14 years old as opposed to 130 years, is that right? And I think therefore we had some of an advantage in that we haven't had the baggage of history and the legacy issues of doing certain things in a certain way. And so from the very beginning, we've always believed that innovation and creativity has been a hallmark of the programming we present. And for that reason, change and social engagement has always been a part of what we do, and engagement of our faculty and our students and our community at large. And whether that's in terms of commissioning the work, commissioning work in conjunction with the community, in work with faculty research who are involved in the community. We just did the US premiere of a work by Toshi Regan called Parable of the Sower, based on the novel by Octavia Butler. And she's been a fellow with us, a fellow sponsored by the Mellon Foundation. I know Susan's here somewhere. And where she's working actually with faculty in our city and regional planning department, looking at how municipal governments create conditions where things like Ferguson, Missouri occur. And for us to showcase how a musician like Toshi is able to actually have a voice in that kind of conversation, and for us to give voice to the faculty members and our students who are studying this as well, for the audience to understand that art does not exist in a vacuum, and that, in fact, commentary, social commentary is always a part of art. And artists are chroniclers of our time. And so we've never actually ever separated this notion of change and art and dialogue and art in our work. We could always do better. There's no question. But I really believe it's much like conversations around diversity, these are not checklist items for us. They're just part of who we are every single day.
Yeah.
I think that's an incredible point and sort of distinction to make, and for people here today who are leaders of long-standing, institutions, Emil's point about, this is what they've created almost really from the get-go. I think my wonderful predecessor, Ken Fisher, is out somewhere in the ether watching this, and Ken and the UMS team really deserve an enormous amount of credit for not only helping this series evolve from really almost exclusively a classical music presenting organization to this incredibly vibrant, multidisciplinary institution that not only presents a wide variety of work, but does it with incredible depth and creating an enormous amount of contextual activities around the work to make it that much more meaningful and stimulating for audiences. So, what I can definitely attest to, having worked at, frankly, 3 orchestras, all of which were 100 years old or older, and in the case of the New York Philharmonic, 175 years old. That's a very challenging idea to think about, some fundamental rewiring, if you will, in terms of what the institution is there to do. And frankly, we're fortunate in that we have a platform both at UMS and at North Carolina that we're able to pivot, and we're able to move and sort of bob and weave, if you will, with what's happening around us. We're not, we don't have an orchestra of 100 musicians, we don't have a ballet company, we don't have a full operatic company, and so we're able to actually, I think, be more nimble in what we do and how we decide to do it.
And therefore, we have more responsibility, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I love that both of you have mentioned the importance of dialogue. And before I present my last question, I want to invite everybody here to consider any questions you may have. We're going to open it up to a Q&A session. And for those of you who might want to consider writing in your sessions, I encourage you to go to slido.com and look for SphinxConnect. We're in the Renaissance Ballroom, and you can just ask a question even anonymously that way, and I'll have them here on this iPad. So I hope you'll take a moment and start thinking about those questions. I have a question for both of you. Matthew, you just talked a lot about the role of the institution, and Emil, you've also mentioned this in your comments. As a performing artist, I think very much about the role of an artist in society today. And I've asked myself that question in a very personal manner, having been on this trajectory as an opera singer for a decade. When I really boiled it down to what do I think the role of an artist is in society today, for me it always came back to a sense of service to communities. Very much the questions that Emil talked about. How can artists reflect the times? How can we be that mirror and really ask an audience to reflect, and going back even to the Greeks in the sense of catharsis. But as important as I think service is, I wonder if you could each speak to the role of the arts institutions in your communities, and not only that role and how it might be different for a newer organization than one with a longer legacy, but also how do you measure impact and success? What are the metrics that you're thinking about in that? And perhaps even, who do you getting it right in terms of that?
I'm pretty sure it's Emil's turn to go first.
Okay. Well, there were a number of questions in there.
There were.
And I'm going to forget the order and proper sequence. But the first thing I heard was about metrics. I think maybe, is that okay if I start there?
Of course.
In our field, metrics have always been sort of this very strange idea of how to measure qualitative impact. How do you measure the benefit that we provide in our community? But we at the university are blessed in the fact that we've actually been doing this at the university for over 250 years. And we have an entire institution within our university structured for metric and measurement and qualitative impact. And so for us, what we've been doing is really focused on longitudinal qualitative studies with our students to see how engagement in the arts actually affects everything from their choice of major to their career aspirations, their likelihood to think certain things. And so we're doing it that way. Whether or not that's really necessarily affected how we've do things going forward, I can't say that it has yet. But we are trying to find a way to do that. The good news for us is that we always have a new set of data sets because our students change every year. And we can figure out a way. And so we've always seen them as an opportunity for us to capture some new information. And so in the last couple of years, just trying to build that structure for us has been important. One of the things we've been thinking about and seeking funding support is, can we actually hire someone in-house to do that, who actually is a scholar by nature in terms of metrics and measurement. It's something very important to us that way. Second question was?
Well, the three questions were the role of your arts institution in your community. How do you measure the success? And also, who do you think is getting it right?
Okay. The role of our organization in our community. You know, I think when we first began in 2005, I had the honor of being the founding director of this program. It didn't exist before then, and so it was a bit of a blank slate. And you know, we had to copy a lot of people in order to get started. And of course, the first people we went to are our friends over here to my left, and we looked at what they were doing and really believed in their work. Our desire has always been to both be artistically distinctive, to be forward-thinking, never to follow the audience, but to lead the audience. And so for us, commissioning work has always been a big part of that. And never wanting to be afraid and to be aware of whenever we actually self-censor ourselves. I think the struggle for us right now is, and as we think of it going forward, we really didn't do a great job in clarifying our role in the community beyond bringing the performances to them. We did a great job actually in providing value to our students. But there is, of course, a distinction between providing value to your students, because we have 30,000 of them on our campus, but also providing value of a similar sort to the 1 million people in our MSA area. And one of the things that I've been really focused on recently is trying to understand how artists, to your point, Carla, can actually teach us better ways for us to engage differently with our own communities. And so, because of what I said earlier, we haven't had a robust or mature traditional community outreach program or education program in that sense. And we deliberately chose not to do that because we also know that it's a bit of a financial black hole, and that it's something that where you can never do enough. And so we purposely focused on our own internal campus constituent community. I should say that artists like Toshi Regan have really kicked us in the ass and reminded us that we have a responsibility in ways that we actually perhaps forgot. And so what we're focused on now in a dialogue internally in our own organization, and I think with our board and our university at large, is really how can we as a distinctive arts organization that commissioned 50 works in 14 years, how can we redefine what community engagement looks like? It's as opposed to, and no offense to anyone who does this in the room or on internet, but as opposed to busing kids to see a concert or to doing kiddie concerts in schools, as opposed to those very transactional ways. What can we do to actually engage people of all kind in the creative process? And how can we get them involved in the creation of work? And so our shift in mindset really about community engagement really falls into this category of co-creation. And so we're about to launch actually an initiative on we're engaging communities through the creation of art. And so we just opened yesterday, and like Matthew and Carla haven't slept very much, we just opened yesterday a new venue. And it's the first arts venue of our university that's built away from the campus. And it was built in town. And it was done that for a reason, because we needed to create space where the community felt they could actually come in. Because like many universities, they're a bit forbidding for people, especially if you don't have a PhD or a student there. And we saw that with our own programming, that for the challenges we faced, that coming into our space has really been an obstacle. So, I'm sorry, I'll keep going very quickly, I'll go faster. So we're right now focused on this notion of, can we actually involve the communities in creation of new work? And it's more to come about that.
That's wonderful, and congratulations on the opening of the new building.
Thank you.
I have a few comments I'd love to add to that, but first I'd really like to hear from Matthew.
Yeah, I'll try to, I'm going to go backwards, actually, kind of start with purpose and maybe hopefully land on metrics. So at UMS, again, I mentioned that our organization has really evolved in terms of what it presents and how it presents over the years. We have a wonderful, institutional mission around inspiring individuals and our communities and connecting our audiences and artists in uncommon and engaging experiences, which is great. What I try to think about when I think about UMS, and I've been there for 6 or 7 months now, so I probably know just enough to be dangerous, but is what I think about when people say, well, what exactly is your job, as the president of UMS? And I always sort of describe it as the role is really to help create, the most dynamic, the most diverse, the most representative sort of platform for expression for artists who come to work with us, and for the team that we have and with all of our partners in the community. And it's really about creating the best environment in which they can do amazing work, and the best environment for our audiences near and far from throughout Southeast Michigan or beyond to really to have these experiences, whether it's a fully formed work or, as Emil said, that they get a window into the creative process. So what's interesting about what many of the panels have talked about is to think about absolutely, what do presentations look like? Who are the artists on stage? Are they representative of your community? But I also believe very, very strongly in the intentional side of programming that says, if you want to be relevant, if you want to be connecting with your community, then you're going to have to, for many organizations, really rethink the subject matter and content, if you will, that you're presenting. And that, we all have a traditional side of our programming, to be sure, but I think many of us are extremely excited and energized by the opportunity to now program in this more intentional way. And that in and of itself is going to help us become more diverse and representative, because if we're really engaging in the issues of today, we're going to be engaging artists who are engaging in those issues themselves, and those are not often in the most traditional spaces. So I don't want to discount in any way the efforts to actually find a measurable way to increase the number of artists of color on stage, but I also think that you get there with a fundamentally different sort of approach in terms of your programming itself. I did want to say something about metrics, because I agree with Emil that we as creative and arts organizations, all of us struggle with the ways in which we need to quantify success. But I will say, especially in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the process that we've now begun formally at UMS, both internally with our staff and soon with our board, it's paramount that we actually have some real metrics and some goals and some accountability in the organization. Some ways in which we're going to define what that work looks like, what its impacts need to be, and the way in which we're going to hopefully have our organization evolve in as dynamic a way as in many ways our programming has evolved over the years.
Great. I want to open it up to questions now. I think we have a microphone over here, one over here, and Looks like we've got someone ready with a question. Hello.
Hi, my name is Amanda Kemp, and I'm the founder of Theater for Transformation. And the question I have for you, and I'm going to direct it to, oh my gosh, I think I got nervous and forgot your last name. Is it Kang?
Yes.
Okay, good. To Mr. Kang, is it has to do with this whole thing about a transactional relationship with the community, getting something so you can get some photographs and put it on your website or your brochure, right? We know about this. I mean, I've been around a minute. But the goal of having a transformational relationship, right? And so we have this new piece that we're preparing in April. And one of the things I wanted to do, and it's been difficult to sell it, one of the things I wanted to do is that once we had created it in our town, is to take it on the road. It's called We the People 14. But my idea was that we're going to feature a local gospel choir in it. But why, when we go on the road, couldn't we feature a local gospel choir in your town? And in our production, we have a youth strings ensemble that's playing with us because my husband directs it. So when we come to you, why couldn't we include a youth group? Do you see what I'm saying?
Of course,
so that so that we build up where we go local artists as well as, you know, do the work that we're doing that we've spent a lot of heart and money creating. And but that requires presenters to think to do more, because they can't just, you know, sign a check. So I thought everybody would be excited. But you're the first person I've heard talk about it like co-creative and not being transactional. So I just wanted to say that out loud. How would you recommend we connect with people who want to do that kind of work?
Well, I think I can just say that you're talking to two of us who you're preaching the gospel to us.
Yeah.
So, and I really believe that we actually walk the walk there. So it's not, and I mean this with all due respect, it's not a new idea for us. We've been doing it already. I think there are going to be just some presenters who necessarily aren't interested in that kind of engagement. They are really interested in their bottom lines, and they're interested in selling out their shows. And I think the only thing we can do in the field is to lead in ways that we believe is the right way to be relevant in our communities. And we can't, of course, force others to do the same. Yeah. I think if I really would encourage you, though, to continue to push that connectiveness and connectivity with your work and the community's work, because, and you can actually talk to presenters about how that's going to also generate audience, because again, that local gospel choir have families, have friends, and they're going to also come to the performances themselves. So even if they don't believe in the artistic and community value, they can actually see how it helps their bottom line. So I think the key really there is to be able to sell it on all different levels, even though you know in your heart that it's the right thing to do artistically. Does that make sense? And I think the transactional nature of it is also a mindset. And again, with Matthew and me, I think one of the reasons why we're in this field right now is because we believe in the transformational possibilities of what we do. And we believe in the multiplicity effect of what we do. And that really does involve the fact that the impact of the work we do does not stop once people leave the theater or the concert hall. It has to live past that. And the only way to do that is actually to build long-term relationships between artists and communities. And you know, we have to get out of the way. You know, we're really just the choreographers, the brokers, the intermediaries, and we're trying to bring artists together with communities. And so whatever we need to do to make that more real and meaningful and supported is really the way I think we see our work. So I encourage you to keep doing that.
Can I add just one thing? And I think I've been thinking a lot about the sort of power of choice right now, and I think for you as a company and for us as a presenter, you know, you have choices that you will make in terms of where you want to go and present your work and the way in which you want to produce it. And we as presenters have that same choice. We want to find companies that actually want to go that extra step, that actually want to dive that much deeper into the subject matter in terms of embracing the community as well. So I don't want to say something too provocative about our relationship with the ensembles and the artists that we engage and that we commit to, but frankly, we in our own way as presenters, I think probably whether we've articulated it or not, have a responsibility to engage those companies, those artists, those organizations, you know, with whom we share a belief that engagement is incredibly important and will make the work that much more meaningful. I think you asked a question earlier about people's own journey through this work as well. Did you not? Which I loved, which it's probably time for another session, but I will say to you that I'm on that journey and learning a lot every day.
Awesome. And I just want to say, just a last thing, I think it's so important, especially now, to see ensembles that are multiracial and multicultural.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get into your box, your slot, your community, which is under attack, understandably. But the people who are trying to make connections between these different issues and struggles, we need them. We need to see them and understand that being for someone else doesn't mean that you've left the ground of your own community.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank
you for your question.
Hi, my name's Maya. I go to Baldwin Wallace Conservatory, and just kind of a fun fact, my friend was accepted to UNC Chapel Hill.
Hey!
He's a musicologist, and I actually just applied to UMich, so hey.
Okay. Go Blue.
My question was actually a question that she asked before at a different panel, similar question. You talk about people who are interested in the bottom line and how we have to be leaders and sort of be in the fore of the sort of change that we want to see. But I'm just wondering, like, what motivates you to reach out and be more diverse? I mean, as a person of color, you might understand I want to see more people that look like me, but just more broadly speaking, where for you personally, where does that come from?
Where does the drive come from?
Yeah.
Oh my God. We might need to lie down on a sofa and talk about my mother. I think the real drive comes from sharing our love for the arts, love for music, for theater, for dance, for culture, its impact on our lives. And we want everyone to believe it's for them. We want everyone to believe there's a reflection of them and they see themselves in the work. And that drive to create that kind of relevance and connection is what gets me up every single day. And there isn't any kind of a job description or salary package that's going to change that. That's just who I am, what I've been doing. And I think that's the privilege that I think Matthew and I both have in our jobs right now, is that we are driven from that area. And it isn't something where we think we know everything. I'm not saying that at all. It's really this idea that we are also forever curious. We're also forever the student. We're also forever learning. And we also want to know more. We want to do better. And we really do believe that we want to encourage young people to think the same in terms of their own curiosity and ambition.
I would say for me it's twofold. Having really been totally a product of a classical music upbringing and background, and that's what I aspired to do, and having really existed in that world, in that very white European-centric classical music world, and really especially in the last several years of my tenure as a manager, really feeling an incredible level of frustration about that, and what we can and can't seem to be able to do. What's been really amazing for me in entering this multidisciplinary world, especially in theater and dance, of which I'd had some involvement but not nearly like I do now, is seeing an incredibly vibrant array of art forms who frankly, at times, relatively speaking, are farther along in this conversation and in this journey in terms of being more diverse, both in terms of thought and approach, but certainly in terms of the artists themselves. And I think Emil's right. You have to have this constant drive. It's like being a musician. It's like being anything else in the creative disciplines. You're never done. You're never finished. You never arrive. And if you feel that way, it's time to stop. So I think we need to have this. We have this drive, have this push that says, we're doing a lot of great work, but we're nowhere near where we want to be ultimately in terms of what we do and how we do it, and how we look.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, my name is Omari Rush. I'm Executive Director of Culture Source here in Detroit. And before I make my actual comment question, I don't know, as a person who used to run a K-12 education program, I would actually just like to affirm the importance of young people having experiences in concert halls, for instance, that may, on the surface, seem transactional, but are immensely important in showing them what they could be, just inspiring them to be different and to reach for more. And so, because I've just seen it happen. And so, while it's not necessarily a kind of a deep, in-depth, ongoing experience, it still is a very important one that I believe should be invested in. And so I hope that as you all with some resources and ability to kind of move things would continue to find ways to do that or pioneer new ways for doing that. My then actual question is, I mean, you all are on university campuses, which are having a really interesting moment related to how students are expressing themselves, how the public is feeling like they want to be engaged, embrace free speech. And I guess just an insider's view of what's happening. How are you seeing what's happening on campuses and your role as presenters in helping folks comment, helping folks express, or just responding?
Yeah, this is incredibly timely. We're literally, today is the last day of a 3-week intensive theater festival at UMS called No Safety Net. And it's 4 works of theater and a huge array of contextual activities around it on some more provocative themes that actually relate to discussions and sometimes demonstrations and activism on college campuses today. So the 4 works dealt with the history of slavery and race and racial relations in America, the Underground Railroad game, really incredibly provocative and compelling work by Jennifer Kidwell and Scott Shepard. A piece about terrorism and the psychology of terrorism and young people and how children who experience terrorism and acts of violence respond to that. A work about the transgender community and gender transition and gender identity. And frankly, a work that's very ambiguous but really hard-hitting around depression and addiction and self-healing and recovery. So what I've really got excited about when I was in discussions with UMS and the University of Michigan about coming to the series and leaving New York, one of the pivotal moments was when the president of the university, Mark Schlissel, said to me, it's not that the arts are just a nice thing here. I need the arts to be a vehicle for dialogue and for discussion and to go in directions around certain issues that are sometimes hard for other curriculum and other studies to go. And so that sense, look, I think in the arts we all like to believe that we're truly needed, for lack of a better way to describe it, and vital. And when you hear leadership and when you see that landscape, not only believing that you're vital, but needing your help, for lack of it's not a very eloquent way to say it, but needing your series and your programming to help students and faculty and the community have a discussion around some very difficult issues. We're learning so much and have learned so much over the last 3 weeks. We'll know how to do it even better, I think, next time. But we've done some extraordinary work, and I think that is that's going to be not the exception going forward. I think that will become a core part of who we are and what we do.
I just encourage you all, Amari and others, to read what Matthew wrote as part of this festival, because I think it sums up exactly what he says, perhaps even better.
Hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon. My name is Kinu. I am a composer based in New York City. I like to write for films and for TV shows. I have a question in terms of presentation. So I've been traveling around the world lately, sort of blogging sort of my experiences of writing for films, and on the other side of like in Shanghai and in Beijing and also in Madrid. And what I want to do is connect everyone. And now, since I'm here in New York, I'm going to go to Mexico in about a few weeks, 2 weeks. And I came in this panel pretty late, so I'm sorry to inform you, but just from reading the title, I just wanted to sort of come up and just sort of expose my dream, which is to figure out a way to present a sort of like a John Williams like Tanglewood night where they have the orchestra and the screen where they're playing your music. I would love to have like a group of composers come together, maybe at colleges, and to play and perform. Orchestras from the colleges performing the music from their movies. I was trying to figure out how I can do that and go about presenting that in a way that still has its eloquence instead of its sort of spontaneity is how I'm presenting it now to you. So any thoughts on that?
Well, the one thing I'll just say is you have to keep sharing your idea and keep talking about it to lots of people. And I'm sure Matthew and I will both be willing to continue that conversation with you, just to give you the feedback and thoughts that you might need and hopefully can be useful to you. Because I think your idea itself is going to grow, and we want to make sure that it can grow in ways that can be useful to others and still be meaningful to you. I look forward to that conversation.
Thank you.
I kind of want to add something to that. I feel like I'm in a bit of a unique position here on the stage, and I want to take a moment and acknowledge my gratitude because I actually started a relationship with the University Musical Society when I was 14. I was still in high school, and Matthew mentioned Ken Fisher, who's someone I know dear to all of us on stage here. Ken, if you're watching, hi, we're sending a big hug. But Ken took a chance on me at a very, very young age. I was, a kid from Ypsilanti. I didn't have a lot of opportunities there, and literally went and knocked on his door and said, I just want to intern. I just want to learn. And that started a very, very long relationship, both with the University Musical Society for me, but also this idea of mentorship. And it's something I'm hearing from both of you, not just towards artists, but within your organizations. And as someone who's benefited from that, that journey not only led me to becoming a professional artist, but when I started a transition from that traditional paradigm in opera to the bigger question of how can I serve and what could I do, and founding a not-for-profit and trying to find sort of unique ways and projects to use my voice literally and figuratively to advocate for the things I believe in. I know that I would not be where I am today on that journey if it weren't for the kindness, the generosity of people like Ken Fisher and like Emil and like Matthew, whom I've met prior to being on stage. And I mean, Emil I met 4 years ago when I was just at the very beginning of that journey. So I think one of the things that's just so special about this field and about conferences like this, and I certainly want to cite the Sphinx organization as being amazing in the way that they cultivate this, is that spirit of listening, of sharing, of helping one another, wherever you are on your path. Whether I might be able to help mentor someone else who's starting their journey, or someone with your expertise and your position might be able to be willing to listen to me. And it's just a very, very special thing. So thank you both. Thank you to Ken Fisher, and thank you to everybody who embodies that spirit. I think we have time for one more question.
All right, Willie.
Hello, I work with Matthew at the University Musical Society. I have a question about presenting. Presenting allows for people or presenters to do so many different things. At UMS, what Matthew was just describing with the No Safety Net Festival, a theater festival, but in the midst of that, we also had tonight we have a symphony orchestra, and earlier we had a song recital, we had a singer-songwriter recital last night, just lots of different things. Because of all the different ways that people have been able to express themselves over the past 30 so years through presenting in different disciplines, music, theater, dance, and not just traditional classical music or ballet or the SOBs, right? We have seen a stagnation and kind of, as far as opera is concerned, a moving backwards with diversity on the stage in those areas, specifically when we're talking about race, meaning we're seeing, in opera, we're seeing less non-white people on stages at the largest opera houses than we did in the 1960s, which is interesting, especially at the top of the field. And then in classical music, in orchestras, the line has not moved very much at all. And I guess what I'm wondering, my question is, what role is presenting playing and kind of not encouraging, but because people don't say, well, the only way I can be a professional musician and go to the Kennedy Center or go to BAM is to be playing the violin. Now I can do whatever I want to with my violin, not just playing Mozart, and somebody will put me on a stage. Is that contributing to this kind of like the classical fields kind of staying where they were, those audiences remaining the way that they are, and those performers remaining mostly white and Eurocentric, and presenting as this world of diversity and all these different things, or those two things kind of working against each other? I hope that makes sense.
It does. I think it kind of circles back to the first question on stage and about that needle moving and what your thoughts and your perspective might be, having been in the orchestral world and now in this new role as presenters. Any further thoughts that you could share?
Well, Willie's my colleague, so we can, he and I
can
can
talk
talk
at
about
work.
this anytime. But I think it's a great question, and I sort of tried to allude to this earlier without being too provocative, which is that I think we as organizations make choices, and I think we have to be clear about all the time about why we're making those choices, you know, for our audiences, for our community. And that's not to say we're going to completely revolutionize the criteria with which we choose ensembles or artists and partners, but I think that we have to take that into account. And the reality is, we all know as presenters, if we had 10 of our colleagues here today, we could, you know, each of us could tell a story about a partnership or engaging an ensemble or an artist in which the relationship and the experience was transformational in terms of the art that was presented, but also what was learned and what was explored. And we can also tell the converse, the story of the, you know, engaging an ensemble or a company to come in, and it's just very clear that it is totally transactional. We're going to play a concert. We want this fee. We'll see you next time when we're here. And I'm not saying that we're not going to continue some of those relationships, but I do believe longer term we have a responsibility as presenters to partner and engage companies and artists who have the commitment and the resolve in ways that we feel. And I think diversity, equity, inclusion has to be a big part of that. So we will have to, as an organization, think about our choices going forward.
I guess I would just add that I think you were alluding to a question, is there a causal relationship? If the presenters are doing X, is that taking the urgency away from others?
Validating
Or is that,
existing behavior.
I mean, I don't know if any of us know that answer or believe. I think we all do what we think we can do. And, you know, again, as Matthew said earlier, we don't have 100 musicians to employ. We don't have companies to employ. And, you know, of course, we do have an entire staff to worry about. And in my case, we have 6 venues to run every day. But we know that there's always going to be sort of this baseline of artistic work we do. And it does, in a sense, pay the bills, and it generates support, and it builds, the generosity, it evokes the generosity from people. But we always have to make sure that everyone is aware why they're doing that, and why are we doing these things, and what direction we're going in. And so I think what Matthew is suggesting and you are as well with the work that UMS is doing, is that there's always something more that you're trying to achieve. And I feel like that's really the thing that I'm most proud of me and my colleagues, is that in the work we're trying to do every single day, we're always expressing and articulating to our communities that we're trying to do more, we're trying to do better. Mm-hmm. And we're never satisfied with status quo and what we've accepted. So it's not about that we are better or that we're doing more or having more impact, it's that we're always just seeking something else. And we want our audience to believe that it's the change and it's the journey as opposed to that transaction that we want them to value.
Do you feel as if, I guess the point of my question was, presenters seem to have more flexibility in what they can present, whereas the symphonies, the opera, the ballet, they have this standard repertoire that they're working within, and so that limits what they're able to do, so therefore it causes their artists to be very homogenous and their audiences to be very homogenous in a way that presenters don't. And do we see presenters playing a role in the kind of the lower status of those kind of benchmark institutions going forward?
I think that's a big question, and really merits its own panel, which hopefully Sphinx folks
You heard it
out
here
there-
first.
Hopefully we can continue that conversation
moderate,
perhaps at
Willie.
next year's SphinxConnect. The only reason I say this is because our time is up, and I do want to give that question the space that it deserves. So maybe that can be continued offline. I also just want to pay tribute to a question we received and ask you all to just sort of think about this. The question is it enough to bring diverse audiences to classical music? How do you bring artistically and stylistically diverse creations to your stage, and can you give an example? So another question to sort of consider, and hopefully we can take that question offline as well. I do want to close on time out of respect to the Sphinx folks that have had us here. Let's please give a very heartfelt round of applause to our two presenters today. Thank you so much.